Remember last time we made these two doohickeys and I covered them in a slurry of a mixture of two different clay-like putties, sanded this one too aggressively and completely forgot about this one. So I think I'll put a little bit more on this, we'll do this, then we'll sand them both a little bit more gently. I don't want to get any into the slot for the saddle. I've sanded off most of the surface slurry, but I'm worried, with good reason, that if I go any further I'll just start scooping it out of the pores. This has actually happened when I've actually used a commercial sanding sealer as well on previous builds. What I'm going to try this time is putting a little bit of shellac all over in the hope that that will cement the grains of filler powder into the pores of the wood, allowing me to sand it a little bit further and finer. You'll note that I taped the back of the bridge. We don't want anything getting there. These are dry now, but I'm going to put them aside. I'm not going to start sanding on them until the shellac is rock hard. Plenty of time for that later. What we're going to do now is glue the fretboard onto the neck. But first of all, we've got to take this mask off. It is now time to glue on the fretboard, and for that I'm going to be using this clamping caul, which has a negative radius curve this way and a positive curve this way, and yet it is quite flexible, so that by clamping at either ends we know that it's going to be pushing evenly through the middle. I've been running around chasing squeeze out as it appears and tightening the clamps. I had a bit of a worry for a while. I think one of the indexing pin nails must have shifted while I was setting things up and the board wasn't on straight, but I think we've sorted it now. I'm not very happy with that. The join line here is wider than a hairline crack, as it is here. We're going to be able to make it look nice, but the problem is I don't understand how it happened. My clamping caul was adequately scooped, so it should have been providing plenty of pressure along the edges. The neck was perfectly flat and straight. The truss rod was not sticking up. I think the only thing that I can take away from this is next time do a dry run first and inspect the crack. Then maybe we can work out what needs to be done. But for now, we're just going to be cleaning up these edges, making the transition between the neck and the fretboard smooth on both sides. Time to fit and finish the heel cap. Time to fill the rest of the voids, the ones we can be happy about, grain features, and the ones we are less happy about, gaps around the bindings. This lovely K symbol is 20 inches in diameter. That means its radius is 10 inches. My fretboard has a radius of 11, so having the fret wire bent to a slightly tighter radius than the fretboard is what I think is a good idea. This fret wire bender has two passive rollers, a drive roller, a crank, and a plunge screw that moves the crank up and down. It's not perfectly even, which means I have to make multiple passes with a different clock position of the crank handle each time, and do it very, very gradually. Whoops, that's too much. That press screw is very, very sensitive. Well, they are all more or less 10-inch radius, and by that I mean some are more and some are less. Two things need to be done before we start hammering in frets. First is that we need to put some cardboard on these two areas. Tape is not enough, paper is not enough. It's got to be something heavier, and cardboard it is. Second is that some of these frets have got compacted sand, and some of them even may have a bit of glue from when we glued on the fretboard. They all need to be cleaned out so that they are as clean as when we first cut them. We don't want to be finding out that they're blocked when we start hammering in. Did I say two? The third thing is that we want to widen these slots a little bit, particularly up in this area, where we are going to be nervous about how we hammer, because there's not very much wood underneath there. The thing is that this guy, a compass spike, really wants to jump out of the track and scratch the fretboard. Ta-da! Should one use glue when installing frets? There are about as many opinions on the internet as there are people on the internet. Many of them recommend using low viscosity superglue. I have tried that a couple of different ways and have not been able to make it work nicely. One method that I saw a respected luthier using was our old friend Titebond, and that's the method that I will be using today. Some of these are taking an inordinate amount of force. I think this particular batch of fret wire must have a thicker tang. I'm widening the slots wider than I would otherwise do, and that seems to be helping a little bit. I think I'm working out the problem. On my previous builds, I have radiused my fret wire to about 9 inches, which means I can hammer in the two ends first and then smash down the middle. This radius is much closer to the fretboard's radius, and I really need to hammer it in at one end, then the middle, then working my way to the other end. That seems to be working better. I think I'm going to add a new step to this process. Those snipped ends of the frets are awfully sharp. I've cut myself twice holding the frets while hammering them in. So I think we need to kind of dull the ends first. We've now reached the end of the neck block and we're hammering over the neck support piece that you might recall us gluing in a couple of videos ago. I've created this little adjustable leg that sits inside the guitar and attempts to couple the top to the back. I don't know whether it has any sensible effect or not, because it's just awfully nervous when you're hammering on this and there's not much underneath it. Whether it'll actually stay there once I start knocking, and of course there's no sense in putting something like that in unless the bottom is fully supported, otherwise we risk knocking the bottom off. I'll do the rocker test later, but right now I cannot see any gaps along there. That is looking very straight indeed. Guess what I forgot to show, tell and use? My radiused end grain hammering call, which makes seating frets quite a lot easier. Now admittedly, this time we didn't bend the frets enough and that brought its own set of problems, but with slightly more radiused frets this does make the job easier. It has in the past. Never mind, what we must do now is render the guitar playable without giving the player bleeding fingers. Sometimes the snipped end rockets out like a piece of shrapnel, which is actually what it is. Other times it sticks to the nippers. Up at the end we have two problems. The frets are very close together, and there is the soundboard. Now you may understand why I put the cardboard underneath there, and we must use the end of the nippers and rotate them. Oh, that flew off into the wide blue yonder. I now have a flat file and these two file guides with slots cut in them. In the straight case, the two edges are beveled slightly, corresponding to the angle of the edge of a radiused fretboard, so that if I hold the guide against the end of the frets, the fret file will actually be vertical. We use that to take off the pieces of metal that stick out, and we should end up with perfectly vertical, clean edges. The sound of that grating is what we want to hear. As soon as that stops, we stop, because we don't want to be filing away wood. The next one is the same deal, except it has a 35-degree angle. This has even more of a risk of starting to bevel off the top of the fretboard, so when we stop hearing the metal grating sound, we stop. To finish up, I have a fret end dressing file. It's got a little scoop in there that's kind of the shape of a fret profile. The idea is to take off the sharp edges that we've just filed into the bevel. So there's a rolling motion that way, and then also we want to do a little bit of a rounding of the edge. So there's angling it a couple of ways. And then we finish off with steel wool, just to give a bit of a shine. It looks and feels very nice. Only 41 more to go. Once we get up to these high frets, the soundboard gets in the way of the file. It is absolutely critical that we not scratch or dent the soundboard. That cardboard will help us, but we can only use the tiny end part of the file. On the other hand, people are not scraping their fingers against that area, so it doesn't have to be quite so perfect, but it does have to look nice. The steel wool is going to be having to do a little bit of extra share of the work, I think. Yep, that's looking nice enough. Occasionally I will feel a sharp edge where a little sliver of metal right at the edge of the fret is sticking out. This file has a rough edge along each side and a smooth edge at the bottom, so we can just lay the bottom against the fretboard and file away the sharp bit, like so. Now I'm just running my fingers up against the edge, feeling for any sharp pointy bits, and dealing with them with the file and perhaps a little bit more steel wool and a bit of 400 sandpaper. Just run up along the edge like that. And this is a mighty fine fretboard. I think we'll leave it there for this session. Next time we will be finishing the guitar, but not finishing the guitar. Join us then. Cheers.